Will Donald Trump be the next president of the United States of America, or can Kamala Harris still close the gap? It is D Day for the United States of America in an election that will have an impact around the world. And at this hour, it's advantage Donald Trump. But it's a long night ahead in the United States of America, and analysts and experts are warning that it is still too early to call the election. But yes, Trump at this hour is ahead in the counting of votes in the Electoral College. I'm Barkha Dutt, you're with the Mojo Story. Welcome to whichever part of the world you're in. Good morning, good evening. Some might be getting ready to say good night, though I can't imagine anyone in the United States of America is going to get much sleep tonight. It is going to be a long, long night of counting votes as America's D Day is here. It has perhaps been one of the most divisive and polarizing elections in recent history. And at this hour, Donald Trump is leading in the vote counting for the Electoral College. But Kamala Harris's supporters are arguing that she could still close the gap, that there is still a path for possible victory for her to the White House. Barack Obama warned earlier today that it is still too early to call the election, and as we watch this space, we will bring you live updates. The numbers are changing minute by minute, hour by hour. And we have to remember that these are projections, they're not the actual results. And the projections that are being made by different agencies and networks are not identical. They all vary, but they all give Donald Trump the advantage. They differ on what they're projecting at this hour for Kamala Harris. Let me introduce our guests on the program today as we look at what might happen in the United States of America next. Joining us on the program is Vibhuti Jha. If he looks intriguingly like somebody you've seen on Indian TV, it's because he's actually Sanjay Jha's brother with very different politics, clearly. Vibhuti Jha is with the Republican Party in the United States of America. It's good to see you. Also joining us is Jamie Metzel, a man of many parts, an author and analyst. He's the founder and chair of OneShared.world. Jamie, it's always good to have you on the program. Good to see you after a long time. Seema Sirohi is one of the most incisive writers and analysts out of the United States of America. She has a compelling new book, well, not so new anymore, but a recent book that I urge everybody to read. Seema, it's always a pleasure to have you with us. We're also joined by Spencer Critchley. He's an author and political commentator who in his earlier avatars has worked on the Obama campaign. Spencer, it's good to see you here. And also joining me is Anand Ahuja. Anand is a lawyer. He's an attorney at law, but he has been, I know from past experience of meeting him in New York, an advocate, a supporter of the Republican Party. And I'm sure he's hoping this time for a Trump victory. But what's going to happen? That's the big question. Let's bring up the numbers on our screen, the numbers as we have them right now. If we can just bring them on our banners. CNN what has been projecting 91 votes for Kamala Harris, 195 for Donald Trump. The Associated Press projection varies. The Associated Press projection is 112 for Kamala Harris and 198 for Donald Trump. Now remember, vote counting is slower in the United States of America than what we are used to here in India. And it is going to be a while before we have a sense of where the numbers actually stack up finally. And a lot of people on American networks are reminding us that exactly at this moment in 2020, Trump was leading Biden. And then by the time the actual votes were counted, that trend actually flipped. Even so, it's advantage Trump at this point. And let's get reactions to that. Let me start with you, Seema. Give us an overview. What's it looking like right now? Do you think it's, as we say in Hindi, "Ab ki baar Trump sarkar," or it's early days yet?
It's still early. We've been burnt so many times. So it's best not to call or weigh in on either side. But clearly, if the New York Times, the needle is moving, more than 83% towards Trump, that says something, because they've got a combination of exit polls, they've got other polls and their own reporters, etc. So it looks like Trump, perhaps because the coalition he was able to build was wider, deeper, and more, included people that the Democrats either took for granted or forgot about. people, slices of Black American men, Latino men, even Indian American men were kind of moving towards Trump. This was quite unusual. So that happened. While Kamala Harris, she campaigned hard. There's no question about it. She worked really hard in the truncated campaign that she had. But if she doesn't make it, obviously the blame is going to go on Biden. Why didn't he quit earlier, etc., to have a
Hmm.
final?
Yeah.
But given the situation right now, I think the issues of the economy, inflation in particular, and illegal immigration were just overwhelming. Even though women have been given, have rallied around the abortion issue, but
Hmm.
perhaps in terms of sheer numbers, the other two issues are resonating more, even with some women voters. So that's what I would say. The inflation, um, economy, for example, the price of bread has increased to like 176% since 2020. And same with gas and milk and eggs and things like that. These are everyday issues. People face them every day. So,
Hmm.
I think personally, if you ask me, it was not a good idea to close your campaign with a big rally with celebrities and, I don't know which singer was there, but Katy Perry or, Beyonce and people like that. They are not the people who are hurting. They are not the people who are kind of were undecided or leaning towards Trump.
But it's not done yet, Rasima. It's
It's
not
not
done
done
yet.
yet. It's not
It's
done yet.
not done yet. And we're analyzing already, or we're in that instinct of analyzing a Kamala Harris defeat. And indeed, even as we've been speaking, Associated Press has given more than 200, now projecting more than 200 seats. If we can have that banner up, 210 to 112 for Kamala Harris. But I hear you. I think you're talking about a kind of elite cocoon, an elite liberal cocoon, and outside of which there were people struggling with everyday issues. I want Spencer's take on this. Spencer, the man whose campaign you worked on, Barack Obama, has been urging people, don't call it yet. It's going to be a long night. Analysts are talking about how in 2020, Trump had the lead over Biden, but it's only when the final votes were counted that the results flipped. Do you believe that could still happen, that there is still a path for Kamala Harris, or do you think that this momentum now belongs to Donald Trump?
No, I think certainly for the moment it is too early. This is quite likely the well-known red mirage because of the different rates at which ballots are counted, depending on whether they're mail-in ballots or polling day ballots, and depending on which states you're talking about, because some states like Pennsylvania count much more slowly than other states like Florida, for example. It's entirely possible, of course, that Trump will win. I think what we know at the moment is that perhaps the polls were so far surprisingly realistic in that it has appeared to be every bit as tight as the polls predicted. Now, again, that could change, but I would caution viewers not to read too much into what we're seeing so far. As far as the New York Times needle goes, it should not be dismissed. But on the other hand, in 2016, that same needle famously was predicting something like a 99% likelihood of a Hillary Clinton win at one point, and then it suddenly veered wildly as the night went on, and we saw how differently that worked out.
So you're holding your analysis because you're not convinced that this is the actual outcome, Spencer?
That's right, yeah.
Fair enough. I think both sides have hopes alive, and that's fair. The New York Times needle is on our screen, but Spencer reminds us that this needle lurched towards Hillary Clinton and got it terribly wrong. So everybody's being very cautious, having learned from past mistakes. Vibhuti, you're a Republican Party supporter. Not all Republicans support Trump. Do you want Trump to be your next president?
Oh, yes, I do. I do, because I think he did well in his first term. And one of the reasons why he is gathering so much support is because his entire term is before the eyes of the people to evaluate, examine, dissect, or trash, to make your pick. But one thing we do know, that during his term, No new wars happened. During his term, inflation was at 1.6 or 1.8%. During his time, we know that employment rates and real wages were higher than anybody else for cutting across all sections of the society, and immigration was in control. Reverse that, all of these are problem in Biden administration, all of it. And people are feeling it. But the New York mayor who accused or kind of lambasted Biden administration for their lax immigration policy, he suddenly went into an investigation and there are charges filed against him. Think about it. Your own party man, who is a mayor of New York City, which has a history of, excellent cadre of mayors who revived the entire New York City from the gutter that it was in 1990s to what it has become today. And he is asking a budget of billions of dollars at $400 per day for illegal migrants to live in five-star hotels. You see the common man in New York City or anywhere in the country really annoyed. And Seema said it very correctly. The entire romance that they had with the people and the vote, you knew it was fake. There was nobody more ingenuous in making statements that were so wrong. So here is another very important issue to evaluate. The Indian American community. Why did they go? Traditionally, they voted 80-20 pro-Democrat. This year, it is likely to go down to 50-50. If not 60-40, it will go down to 50-50. That's what the estimate is. The reason, not much talked about the fact. Seema pointed out to economy, price rise, and everything else. But there was a very important element that played into the minds of many Asian and Southeast Asian families across America, because they began to treat children, Democratic Party, as accidental tourists in the family. Children are not, in our culture, children are different kind of a thing. And the parental control, the transgender sex change, that California governor introduced a legislation that if you and I disagree with the gender change of our child will be taken away. This horrified many groups of people. And a Muslim friend of mine told me, for the benefit of Spencer and the other gentlemen, he said, I don't want my son Muhammad to go to school and come back as Mumtaz. Because his son, this man's son, a 5-year-old boy, said, Dad, I want to wear girls' clothes. And he was horrified.
Okay.
So there is an issue that cuts across.
So the debate.
Just one Spencer point. Yes, I will not celebrate until the last whistle has gone. So yeah, the whole time to go.
Yeah, I was just going to say, A, we have to keep saying that it's not over yet. That's the health warning. B, there is the debate around the trans community and what children should be entitled to do in terms of sex change surgeries. I know is a big polarizing issue in the United States of America, but I can't imagine, as Vibhuti is arguing, that it's the one issue that has actually swung or moved the vote of the Indian Americans, 5.2 estimated million Indian Americans, who have traditionally, by the way, in the past voted Democrats. There is also, though, Trump's comments on the attacks on Hindus and other religious minorities, Hindus in Bangladesh, that has got perhaps more attention. But Vibhuti, you of course speak as a Republican supporter, and fair enough. Jamie, let's bring you in. I know you're not a Trump fan. Are these numbers worrying you?
Certainly, it's worrying to look at all of these figures, and we can all have fantasies before elections, but then the elections just give us numbers. So there were some people who were hoping that maybe there were hidden voters, maybe there was going to be a surge of college-educated women, and at least so far, it doesn't look like that's happening. Certainly, it's not over yet. It's far from over. Key battleground states have not yet reported conclusively. So there is a path for Donald Trump, and there's a path for Kamala Harris. But things are not looking great right now for Kamala Harris. It's our country is extremely divided. There are big, important issues that are dividing us. And for people like me, certainly we can look at individual issues. But I may look young, but I remember the War of 1812. And it really pissed me off when the British attacked the capital of our country. And it really pissed me off on January 6th when the mobs inspired by Trump attacked the capital of our country. And you can go look at the buildings in Washington, D.C., and you can feel that democracy just exists. But democracy is something that we create and recreate. And Donald Trump has attacked the norms and structures of our democracy with the peaceful transfer of power, the most important among them. He has trashed in many pillars of the post-war liberal international order that has helped keep the world safe for nearly 80 years. And so, yes, there are differences on a bunch of issues, but at least as I see it, really the America that we have known is on the ballot. If the American electorate willfully elects somebody who's calling the press the enemy of the people, who has inspired mobs to attack the capital of our country, who has talked about imprisoning his political enemies, it's certainly deeply concerning. But having said that, we're all Americans, and whatever happens, we're going to have to find a way to come together and work together because we're all on the same ship.
One of the things you said is that things are not looking good for Kamala Harris. And while I don't want us to get ahead of the actual results, and history teaches us to be patient before calling this election, to Seema's point about this sort of big bang celebrity last mile by Kamala Harris seeming somewhat out of touch with ordinary folks, one of Trump's Teflon qualities has been to present himself as the regular folk, despite being a sort of billionaire, present himself as the outsider when he's not an outsider, to present himself as a non-elite when he is in fact an elite himself. But the point is that politics is all about narratives. And do you agree with Seema that if Kamala Harris loses, and I'm saying if Kamala Harris loses and Trump wins, then the blame will be put at Biden's door? He took too long to get out of the way. She only had, a few weeks and so on.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree with that. President Biden, who is my former boss, I love him, I respect him. It was not appropriate for him to say that he was going to, at his age, that he was going to seek the nomination for this election. Whatever happens, the right thing for him to have done was 1 year ago to announce that he wasn't seeking the nomination. So we could have had a traditional open primary. I still think there's a hope for the Democrats to win. But if the Democrats don't win, I think it will erase the entirety of Joe Biden's lifetime legacy.
That's a big statement, that if the Democrats don't win, it will erase the Biden legacy. Meanwhile, Associated Press is now projecting a lead for Trump in the key state of Pennsylvania. And this is where Kamala Harris had really set her hopes for her path to victory. And this is breaking right now. Trump projected to get 50.7% of the vote compared to 48.3% for Kamala Harris. Pennsylvania has 19 counts or 19 votes in the Electoral College. So that's a big one. But again, nobody's calling this right now. This is going to keep changing. Anand, this is a big statement from Jamie right now, that if Donald Trump is the next president and Kamala Harris loses, it's going to erase the legacy of the Biden presidency. As a Republican supporter, you might agree with that. What's your take?
I don't think that if one particular candidate from a particular party loses the election, it erases the legacy. In any case, Democrats, they have their long-standing legacy. And before I say anything, like everybody has stated on your panel, I also believe that we should wait till the last result is there. At times, I'm a believer that last over in a game is
I'll
very
have to go
important.
now. Thank you very much.
At times, even the last ball.
Sorry, Anand,
Today,
can I just interrupt you because Spencer has to go? I'll get a quick 10-seconder from him, and then I'll let you complete your point. Spencer, we barely got to hear you, so just a quick last thought before we let you go, and we hope you'll join us again.
I would love to. Thank you so much. And I'm sorry I have to rush. It's a very busy night, as you can imagine.
I understand. No sleep for the wicked, and we're all wicked tonight. But go ahead. Do you want to comment on what Jamie just said, that if Kamala Harris loses, it would erase the Biden legacy? Do you agree with that?
No, I think Biden will go down as a historically effective president, but it might take a while for people to realize that.
What is your expectation given these numbers?
I am anxious that it's even close, given that Donald Trump is intent on overthrowing democracy, as he's already shown. It's extremely alarming. So however it works out, even if Harris wins, we have a very serious problem there. And I am so sorry, I must go.
No, we'll let you go. Thank you for those comments, and I'll take that back to Anand right away. Spencer, thank you. We'll see you later again. I think that's the point, right?
Yeah,
go ahead,
I was giving an example that we won this World Cup on the last ball of the over, that is Surya Yadav's catch. So I will say that we should be cautiously optimistic, but we cannot just conclude right now that Trump has won the election. But coming back to your question, Biden's legacy, irrespective of my differences with Biden's policies, I personally believe that he will go down in the history of the United States as a very sacrificing and great man. I mean, after he got the nomination of Democratic Party, and he could have contested against Trump, and you never know, in election you win or lose. But I personally believe that he very gracefully accepted that he cannot win the election and let Kamala Harris be the nominee. So to that extent, I have a lot of respect for him, that he didn't say that I want to stick to.
Yeah. Well, I think I want to bring in Jamie. I want to bring Jamie in. Orna Bray is joining us, author and commentator. But Jamie, you heard what Spencer said. Biden has a historic legacy. You know, in India, Manmohan Singh, former Prime Minister Manmohan Singh, used to say, "History will be kinder to me than all of you were." Spencer seemed to be saying something similar about Joe Biden. You're of course painting a scenario where Kamala Harris could lose, and given the numbers coming out of Pennsylvania, the dead heat in Virginia, I think the Harris campaign has reason to be very anxious at this hour, because Pennsylvania was a great hope. Again, we're not calling it, but to the point that Spencer made, that Biden is underappreciated. He has a historic legacy. It's just not appreciated. Since you made this big statement, if you can come out with these pictures now, I want to see Jamie's face. Since you made this big statement that Biden's legacy will be erased if Kamala Harris loses, I want you to just elaborate on that.
Yeah, what I don't mean that all of the work that he's done will be lost. What I mean is, just like Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg, who had spent her entire career a justice of the U.S. Supreme Court, made all of these contributions, but then decided to hold on in spite of her cancer and not step down when there was, during the Obama administration. Net, she had, unfortunately, in spite of all of her great contributions, that one decision overshadowed everything else. And so I hope Kamala Harris will win. I have great respect for Joe Biden, but I do believe that if Kamala Harris should lose, that one decision will be the defining moment of President Biden's entire career. And I think that's deeply unfortunate. Even though I have great respect for him, I personally had organized a petition among former Biden staffers after his disastrous performance in the presidential debate on June 27th, calling on him to announce that he wouldn't seek the nomination. It took almost 1 month for him to make that decision. I think anybody looking at President Biden now recognizes just how impossible it would have been for Joe Biden, certainly to win this election, but to serve as president for another 4 years.
Okay, just before we bring in Seema and Arnab, Kamala Harris has improved her tally. So this is like we're saying it every minute when nobody's calling this election yet. Harris is now projected to get 179 to Trump's 214. That's the projection by the AP, the Associated Press. CNN is slightly different. If I can just have the CNN numbers on my screens, it's 145 for Kamala Harris to Trump's 211. So yes, this isn't over yet. It's advantage Trump for sure, but it isn't over yet. I want to bring in Seema and then Arnab. Seema, I want to let you complete your point. Let's assume for a moment, as Jamie did, that Trump is the next president. You were making the point about a kind of celebrity-driven last mile push by Kamala Harris that you think may have counter-bombed because it was a kind of elite echo chamber. I want you to make that point again, saying this isn't over yet. This isn't over yet.
Absolutely. I was surprised because given the fact that in 2016, Hillary did the same thing, closed out with this humongous celebrity rally, while Trump was in some rinky dink town, somewhere. I don't remember where, but he was in Ohio, I think. So, and she didn't even bother to travel to some of these states that she lost. They were so confident. So, the point I'm making is that it is supposed to energize the base. That's why because democratic strategists have been asked this question, what is
Yeah.
this obsession with celebrity? Because we
Mhm.
know the celebrity are always left leaning and liberal and all that, and they are not hurting from the policies that are hurting the people who are deciding this. Why is it 50-50 for the last 3 months? So the strategists say, oh, well, it's to energize the vote. So the next day, your people will go out and vote. And everybody who gets to come to these music concerts and things, their emails are there in the vote bank and they get text alerts and all that. But this is a minor point. I think
Mm.
the bigger issue for the Democrats this time around, in my humble opinion, has been that they weren't able to define, they weren't able to have a clear message. Trump was very clear and he kept badgering at the same message, and it really resonated. She broke it, I'll fix it, was one sentence. Other was like, all these illegals are coming and they're changing the country. Of course, he used extremely vile rhetoric, extremely. But the Dems focused on the vileness of the man, not on the issues and how it's resonating with people. Immigrants taking over little towns in America is a problem, like it or not. Uh, Men, one issue the Republicans have been talking about is men competing in women's sports. People who have changed their sex but still have, I suppose, I don't know that much about this issue, still have the power of the male gender, maybe. So one school volleyball team, one girl was hit by one such person so hard that her eye was injured. In the swimming team in Virginia, college team, the entire team came to a Trump rally when he went to Virginia last week
Mm.
to talk about this issue. They don't want men in women's sport because they can't compete. It's unfair. All the parents are with them. All the parents.
So these are these are a new kind of culture wars that America is
Yes.
divided by. No, sorry, if you will give me a second. I know everybody is on tight sketch, so I want to get in a word from Vibhuti, and then I'll come to you right after. Vibhuti, go ahead.
I had only, you used a very correct word. There is a new kind of a culture war going on in the country. And this exposed the hollowness of the Democratic Party chanting about women's rights. When you were subjugating women's rights in women's sports by allowing transgenders to play. I kept saying, there is a Special Olympics. Why don't you have a transgender games? The ESPN and others can easily sponsor that. But why humiliate young ladies playing in whether in swimming or basketball or any other sport, being beaten up or in boxing for that matter, being beaten up a guy who was hormonally a man? This is where a lot of
It,
people got really upset. And
so
these
both.
remain in the subliminal state of mind that economy being bad for everybody, but I'm affected because my daughter is going to see. And by the way, Barkha, it may surprise you. A
Yeah.
60-year-old professor, lady professor, who teaches in New York University, and for her late night course, and after that she went to her restroom, and there was a guy standing there, and she said, "What are you doing here?" And he said, "I think I'm a woman." A 60-year-old Indian lady. When she complained, she was told that's the way it is. Think about it. And she is a Democrat living in New York, voting for Trump this time. That's what I'm
I mean,
saying.
I hear you, but as a woman, if I were an American citizen, I would be very distressed about the Roe v. Wade situation and the very polarized. I mean, I don't think one cancels out the other. So, but I hear you. The Republicans have picked up wokeness and this entire issue of children. What's going to happen to our children as a big issue. And as I said, it's culture wars. Vibhuti, stay as long
Thank
as
you.
you can. Otherwise, thank you, and we'll see you later. I want to
Thank
bring in
you.
Ornab and then go back to Jamie. Arnab, what's going on? I mean, this is fascinating. It isn't done. It isn't over. And hence one hesitates to bring in postmortem theories just yet. But yes, it is advantage Trump, though Kamala Harris is improving in some of the projections. I can't hear Arnab. Can we unmute him, please? I can't hear you.
Now? Yeah, hello?
Yeah.
Yeah. So continuing some of the conversations that I stepped into, one of the things that has happened, and I've been in this country from 1999, so I've seen several elections, is the absolute polarization that I now see in the US. To the extent that it's something which, again, just to give you a little bit of background, I grew up in the 80s in the US too for many years. So again, I've seen US at different points of time in its history. So the kind of polarization that I see, and the polarization has happened because of certain cultural issues. For instance, I'll give you a small example. So with respect to Trump, there is no doubt that about 50% of the country is extremely devoted for reasons that you may say is wrong or right. I'm not getting into it, but they're devoted to the brand of Trump. So in terms of the culture war, if you go and look at late night television, and you can say, well, who cares? No, a lot of people actually do care. So Trump is made fun of in the way. So I'm not just talking about making jokes, but there is an asymmetry in the way Trump is attacked versus the way, and it wasn't like this before. In previously, there used to be some kind of balance, even in liberal media. For instance, in Saturday Night Live, at the very end, they basically got Kamala Harris, and there was no representation for Trump. And this is like almost election interference. It's like 24 hours before the election almost. They got her in, and they do there's virtually no jokes about Harris. It's an election propaganda, right? No time is given to Trump. Trump is made fun of, like really made fun of, and Harris isn't. Now, these kinds of things for about 50% of the audience, this is exactly what Trump kind of plugs into, that they hate me, not because of the person who I am, but they hate me because of what I represent. This is why you have, and this is what is being seen right now, is that there is a lot of voting by mail by people who did not vote last time. Republicans voting by mail. So Republicans usually vote older. So that means they have mobility problems getting to election. So they're now voting. They're that energized that they're voting by mail at this point of time. That's really swinging in many of the states, because that's not what people predicted. And this is because I believe that it is because of this culture war that has started. Now nobody cares about the issues or policies anymore.
Right. So I want to bring in Jamie, and then I actually also want to look at what either presidency might mean for India and for the world and for geopolitics. But just before that, one last comment on, the culture wars. The fact is, okay, I take Arnab or Seema's point, or even Vibhuti before that, saying that wokeness, quote unquote, is being attacked. The debate around the trans community is a very polarizing issue. But Trump did get up on stage also and basically impersonate oral sex. He got away with that. Trump also, a stand-up comic at a Trump rally in New York, spoke about Puerto Ricans being trash or likening them to garbage, to which Biden made a completely ill-advised comment saying Trump voters were garbage, to which Trump then donned, a jacket and kind of had, impersonated this sort of image of a sort of garbage truck driver and so on. My question really is, what are the Democrats doing wrong in not being able to deal with this somewhat Teflon quality to Trump's, some might call, why some might call it, to Trump's coarseness. He is often coarse. And
Yeah,
while Arnab is correct in saying that there might be a double speak in how he is caricatured, he gets away with his coarseness.
Yeah, he gets away with it, and the Democrats have stepped right into every Republican trap. The Republicans this is the game plan of the Republicans, is to set these traps and to make this election about transgender bathrooms and surgeries and biologically male boxers beating up women in the Olympics and all of these other kinds of things. And the Democrats, by trying to be the party of extreme inclusion, have become a party where it's very difficult for people to say, hey, that just doesn't sound right. And so certainly in the early days on the border, certainly on issues with transgender, there is gender dysmorphia is a real thing. But I think many people in both parties, I think that the way that we're treating this has gotten out of hand. During the BLM, to have people were saying, yes, we all support equal rights for all people, but if you're looting Sephora, that's just wrong, and we should condemn it. And even right now, as we speak, there are pro-Hamas lunatics burning American flags in Times Square, not far from where I am. And so if the Democratic Party, where our party is a coalition, it is a big tent, but if we're not able to say, hey, this doesn't sound right, and the Republicans are goading the Democrats to stand up for these crazy far extremes, I think that's a really bad place for the Democrats. And it's ironic because the Republicans want to run on the culture wars. Economically, the college-educated, white men without college educations have benefited the most from the Biden actual economic policies relative to everybody else, but they feel like they've been screwed over. And I think that's the issue, is there's people don't really pay attention to policies as much as they pay attention to feelings. And I think there are certainly a lot of people in the poor white community who feel like, hey, wait a second, we're starting to feel like second-class citizens. And Donald Trump has spoken to those people and said, I'm going to be your champion, and I'm going to be coarse, and I'm going to be vulgar, but I'm going to fight for you. And that message has gotten through.
So let me pick this up and ask you, how much of a factor the Israel-Gaza issue has been on both sides? If I were to look at the official responses of the Biden administration and Trump's position, I don't see a fundamental difference as such. If anything, it's the left that's been pushing Kamala Harris to take a position that maybe they're disappointed that she hasn't. You spoke about pro-Hamas protesters. Are you suggesting that somewhere the Democrats were not able to keep the center? They tried. I mean, obviously, Kamala Harris tried to walk the central line on Israel-Gaza. Do you think she succeeded, or do you think the far left got attached to the campaign?
Yeah, so it's my view from the beginning that the path to victory for the Democratic Party was the path toward the center. And so again, the Democratic Party is not a party like a traditional political party or in Europe or in India. We're more of a coalition. And so keeping that coalition together is certainly very difficult. But one of the things that we haven't yet spoken about here is the choice of Tim Walz as the vice presidential running mate. One of the reasons that Governor Shapiro of Pennsylvania, wasn't selected was because all of the pressure of the campus and other protesters on the Gaza issues. I hope that Kamala Harris will win in Pennsylvania. But if she loses in Pennsylvania, and if she should lose the entire election, one of the issues that people will raise is, should she have tacked harder to the center? And would Governor Shapiro, who's an extremely popular Democratic governor in a mixed state, have been a more strategic pick? And I think that We'll see what happens. But if Kamala Harris should lose, there are going to be some very, very big questions tomorrow asked about Biden and whether the activate the base strategy was the right strategy, or whether the move to the center strategy, which I would have supported, would have been a better one.
This is a very interesting point, and I want to actually take this to the panel. Did the Democrats? This is the question that has universal applications. So let me bring in Seema. Seema, even in India, we often have this debate, right? When we see the fight between, let's say, the Modi-led BJP and the Rahul Gandhi-led Congress, there has often been the criticism of the Congress when it doesn't do well, that it's lurched too far left. It needs to come back to the center, that the mainstream of any country actually resides in a kind of reasonable, rational center. Do you think that's happened? James speaks as someone who doesn't like Trump, but he feels that in certain spaces the party went too far left, in particular when it came to, let's say, Hamas.
No, absolutely. 2021 was a height of wokeness in the Democratic Party here, and all these cultural issues came to the fore until the time, like in the middle of the Biden administration, that the centrist Democrats told people like AOC and the extreme left that you've got to contain yourself. We're going to lose the entire plot. So they have actually moderated their stance, but kind of little too late. It was a gift to the Republicans, which they exploited extremely well. So, the people who have children, and I happen to have 2 kids, when I think, like, supposing my kids went to school and they were being told about, a certain way to be, just in terms of education, because I've heard stories about Maryland schools where 10-year-old is being asked to give an opinion on abortion rights, and it's a little extreme by any standards. So the Democrats, they really lost the plot. They have nobody but themselves to blame, and the Republicans used it. Now, the thing is, can they claw back? I don't know. I think the Democrats have to do a lot of soul searching, just as the Republicans, if Trump doesn't win, they also have to figure out what to do next. Can they go back to the old Republican Party of John McCain or Mitt Romney? They cannot, can they? The way it has evolved, J.D. Vance is probably going to be the face of the party, or other such people. Similarly, Democrats have to figure out where they're going and how to break this idea that they are the party of the elites. Now, imagine union votes are going more to the Republicans. How is it in my time in Washington, D.C., that the Republicans have become the working class party? How come? Is that weird or what?
Yeah.
So these are the things they have to grapple with. They have to figure it out. And just, it's more than clever slogans. So we are not going back, stuff like that. It's more.
And look at the number right now on your screen. Trump is actually leading in Michigan. And Michigan is where a large part of the Arab American vote, was a factor. So, Seema, I hear you. The fact that, the Republicans today are getting the union votes, whereas the Democrats historically positioned themselves as the party of ordinary folk. And Jamie, as a supporter of the Democrats, is saying the Democrats walked far away from the center. Arnab and Anand, you were wanting to come in. Arnab, I'll start with you. Arnab, I can't hear you for some reason. I just can never hear you. Can you unmute yourself?
Yes.
Yes.
No, I am on. I mean, I'm.
Okay.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah.
So basically, my concern is that.
So once again, one at a time. Yeah, Arnab and then Anandji. Okay.
My concern is that we have spent.
Okay.
You cannot. My concern is that we have.
Okay. Go ahead,
we
sir.
ha-
Go ahead, sir.
we have spent so much time on this culture issue when the culture issue was not even one of the major issues in this election. If you see the number one, 34% voters they voted because the democracy issue, the democracy is in danger. 31% voters they voted because of economy, and Democrats they made abortion as one of the major issues in the campaign. Whereas if you see difference between voters voting for abortion matter as well as immigration, the difference is only 3%. 14% they voted because of the abortion issue, and 11% voted because of the immigration issue. So if you see the culture issue, we have discussed so much, the woke culture and everything, that was not even part of the election. Tell me, what was the percentage of voters they voted because of this woke culture? Not even 1%.
So, what is the main issue? If, as a
The
Republican
main, the main,
supporter,
the main issue
Anil, what is the main issue according to you?
main issue I, as I mentioned, was economy. Number two, immigration. Number three, abortion, and number four, in my opinion, it was democracy is in danger. But it became number one. Why? Because both the parties, Republicans, they feel that democracy is to be protected from, in the United States because of Donald Trump's two impeachments, false cases, criminal cases against Donald Trump. On January 21st, 2017, at the time of Donald Trump's inauguration, the riots in Washington, D.C., in the 4 years of Trump presidency, Democrats not accepting Donald Trump as president, and January 6th. So if you see both the parties, their main concern was to protect democracy in United States, whether it's Republican or
Okay,
Democrats.
okay, okay, okay. I don't want to reopen the debate around election denialism and January 6th, but I do take your point that the main issue was not these culture wars that we spent a lot of time talking about. Most people polled said the biggest issue for them was inflation and the economy. And a lot of people on the Democrat side said the issue was democracy. What was clear was that most Americans, and I think Yashwant, you flagged this, Yashwant Deshmukh, political analyst who leads Sea Voter in Washington today, you flagged how a majority of Americans are not happy with the state of affairs in their country. What we are seeing right now is, of course, advantage Trump. But nobody is calling this election yet because everybody's harking back to how in 2020 Trump was ahead of Biden on exactly this day, and then it took time and the election suddenly flipped. What are you picking up there, both as a numbers man and as a political analyst? I can't hear Yashwant either.
Oh,
I'm so sorry.
are
Yeah,
you
I
getting
can
my
hear you.
voice? Yeah.
Yes,
So a
please
couple
go
of the
ahead.
things very quickly, as the panelist was pointing out about the issues, certainly what looks like that people have voted largely on the bread and butter issues. So economic distress is the thing which has been on the mind of the working class, and that is why the working class itself across the demographic divide, there are some very, very compelling data. Barkha, for example, the number of Latino voters which have shifted to Republicans this time, particularly the male Latino voters, has tripled than the 4 years back. Number of black male African American male voters which have shifted to Republicans is become 4 times. From somewhere like 6-7% range, they are almost trending into about 23-24%. Till the point of time West Coast data was merged in the exit poll data, almost like 45 out of 100 Latino voters seem to have shifted to Republicans. Now, that is unprecedented. Now, certainly the one big issue that has worked for Kamala Harris is of the female voters, because female voters across the demographics have voted for her, largely on the issue of the abortion. It is a very clear issue. But what hasn't worked largely with the huge majority of the Americans, it seems, is the idea of which ironically we have been listening for 10 years in India as well and in many other European countries, Loktantra Khatre mein hai. This idea that if the left side of the spectrum does not win the election, if the right side of the election spectrum wins the election, then democracy is in danger. It's a global phenomenon, Barkha. The way I'm looking at it right now, when was the last time we ever thought that in the Scandinavian countries we would get to see a right-wing government? In so
Yeah.
many European countries, we have seen this campaign working from the left side of the spectrum, that democracy is in danger. And that campaign has fallen flat time after, because it was not the democracy which is danger, it's the economics which is the danger. It's the day-to-day life, it's the bread and butter issues which are occupying the mind, and many of the emotive issues, including the illegal immigrant, are directly related to the issues of bread and butter. So somewhere I believe that Democrats have not appreciated that, and they chose the line that this could be the last ballot, that you would be ever voting for, because if Trump wins again, you may not even. And this is the one line which we have heard so many times, even in India, even in many other
Yeah,
countries.
I was just saying before you joined that many of the debates in different ways apply to India: elite, non-elite, democracy versus non-democracy. Is there a centrist space that stands between the left and the right? Now, Arnab, I want to come to you because we keep trying to speak to you, but then we lose you on the screen. So please go ahead now, Arnab.
Yeah, so the point, I wanted to answer a question that you had asked with respect
Yes.
to Indian politics, and whether you should stay to the center or go to the left when you are faced with somebody who's so
Or the
far to
right.
the right. So in 20
Okay.
yes,
Sorry.
so Trump came to the right. Hillary was a centrist. Hillary was as centrist as a centrist could be. And at that point of time, the Democratic Party essentially sabotaged the candidature of Bernie Sanders, who was considered to be left progressive, because they felt he could not win against Trump. That basically the Democrat big money will not back a Bernie Sanders. That thing obviously was wrong, right? They realized that the only person that Trump could have beaten was the centrist candidate. They learned their lesson. So Biden ran one of the most progressive 4 years of any US president. And that was reflected in the immigration policies. So I also think that the centrist is usually the better counter to the extremist. But the Democrats, after 2016, in my opinion, took the wrong lesson. The problem wasn't that Hillary was a centrist. The problem was Hillary was Hillary. That was the problem. Another centrist, if they had gone with Pete this time, it might have been different. But they chose to go with Kamala Harris, who was seen as progressive. And here's another problem. Kamala Harris is actually not a progressive, if you know her record as a public prosecutor. So she's been, and another problem with Kamala Harris, and again, I'm saying this without knowing if Trump has won, is that Kamala Harris was the first Democrat primary candidate to be eliminated. So she's not even popular within the Democrats. But given her that she was not popular in the Democrats, but she was seen to be a progressive candidate, that I feel was a big mistake for the Democrats to run against Trump.
Okay.
They should have gone with a centrist.
That's a very interesting point, and I want Jamie to quickly respond to that. Yashwant, before you joined us, Jamie Metzel, who's actually a Trump critic, said that he felt that his party veered too far away from the center. So a lot of the debates in the American context apply completely to the Indian context and possibly to other contexts. Jamie, if you want to come in there. Meanwhile, as you're speaking, I just want to share that the big news at this point is that Associated Press is projecting North Carolina for Donald Trump. So, that's a big one. I mean, like, there are a lot of surprise twists and turns coming this evening. Again, AP, CNN have different projections. We're trying to keep track of both of them. Jamie, go ahead.
Yeah, so I think the Americans are very unhappy with their country, which is shocking because we're actually doing pretty well relative to most places around the world. But there is that feeling. And so the question was, who can run as a change candidate? And that's always tricky for a vice president because you've been serving with the president. So how can you be a change candidate? And that's why, as I was saying before, the Democratic Party would have been very, very well served by some kind of competitive primary, ideally a year ago. But we even had time after President Biden's absolutely disastrous debate performance on June 27th. That very night, he should have said, I thought I could do this job, but I can no longer do it. I will not seek the nomination. And then we could have had a process. But with Vice President Harris, just from, I supported her, But from the perspective of everybody who wasn't a Democrat or a Harris supporter, they didn't know how she got there, how she arrived in that role. And so that was very hard for her to position herself as a change candidate. And then when she was asked in the unscripted interviews, what would you do different than President Biden? She wasn't able to answer that question. So I agree with what was just said. There is the positioning, and my very strong view is that the center is the best place for the Democratic Party. And then there's the process. I mean, we have this crazy long 2-year primary system, but what it does is help relatively obscure people like early Bill Clinton, early Barack Obama become tested and known. So 2 years later, everybody says, "Well, I know who that person is," and that's what's missing here. If in fact President Trump becomes the next president, I think it will be very, very necessary for the Democrats to do an absolute soul searching, and I hope the Republicans will too, because I would say that a very, very large number of Republicans are holding their noses with this. The evangelical Christians are a backbone of this Trump victory. And these are not people who support having sex with porn stars while your wife is at home pregnant. There are all kinds of things that people, all Americans, don't like about what's going on here. And if we don't elevate our politics on all sides, we're going to be in even graver danger going forward.
Yeah, Seema, I want to bring you in, and then I'll take last comments from everybody else. Seema, go ahead.
So my overall point, if 70% of the people think the country is going in the wrong direction, the incumbent doesn't win normally. That's what electoral history here shows. Number two, Donald Trump kept it simple, and Kamala Harris wasn't able to define herself in any way that was tangible and that resonated. So then Obama came on the scene. Again, I thought it was a bit of a misstep to tell Black men that, you are not being cool if you don't vote for her because she's a woman. Needless. It was found to be patronizing and condescending by many people. And I talked to some African-American friends of mine. They didn't like that. So, of course, Trump can say anything and get away with it. He has this advantage of that the voters filter out all the filth that comes out, all the vile language and all the awful gestures and everything. The voters feel he is who he is. At some weird level, the voter feels he's a real guy. He's not a made-up politician. And, I'm sorry, but Kamala Harris is very programmed. She's not able to go on for unscripted interviews where when the going gets tough, she just, is not able to give an answer on the fly. So these, I think, would be the thing. Then there are the shy Trump voters. They still exist, I would say. I wanted to point that out.
Yeah.
Because family disputes have become so awful now. People don't talk to each other if you're voting one way or another. So people are not revealing their choices. This is especially true among Indian Americans, by the way.
That's interesting. All right, Seema, thanks for your time. I'm going to take last comments from everybody else. Yashwant, we haven't heard from you enough, so we'll start with you. Go ahead.
Barkha, it seems like that, this country has been bitterly divided all along, but the fault lines are even more exposed with this election. And if Kamala Harris manages to win this election, it will be only and only because of the female voters, because females across the spectrum have voted for her. So certainly there is something for the Republicans to learn that, that part of the story is not fitting in as far as their narrative is concerned. But barring that, abortion and the female issue, I think every other issue has worked in largely in favor of Donald Trump. And at the end of the day, Democrats have to realize that this otherization, this entire branding of you are not democratic enough, you are not liberal enough, you are something, if you vote for Trump, you are something which is not acceptable in the society. That kind of divisive line of theory, I mean, that's something which is repulsive for by the common person on the ground, and that has not worked. 72% people said that things are not going in the right direction. Big, huge chunk of states where, which are going for the Trump right now, number one issue is economy. Let's accept that. I think somewhere down the line, we will have to analyze this, not just from the American perspective, but even from other democracies which have gone to elections this year. I think, ironically, the Democratic side, the liberal side, the left liberal side has gone for issues which are less on substance and more on emotion. And while the right of the scale has gone more on the bread and butter issues, day-to-day life issues. And that is what has mattered more than the Loktantra narrative.
And that's so interesting, because sometimes it's the other way around. The right wing, emphasizes identity.
Exactly. They are known for that. They are known for that. That's the irony of it. They are known to use all the emotive issues, all the Barkha thing and everything under the sun.
Yeah.
But the reality is striking in some different, strange way.
Anand Ahuja, I want to bring you in. I know you're being very cautious and you're not going to celebrate till the last vote is, if the last vote is counted, or in to borrow a cricket analogy, till the last ball is bowled. But the path for Kamala Harris, if she loses Pennsylvania, North Carolina, and Wisconsin, and currently Trump is leading in all three, then the path for her has shrunk. If she doesn't take Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Michigan, and which one am I missing? North Carolina. Then that's kind of it, right? Look at AP is giving 50.9% in Wisconsin to Trump. It's changing. We're not calling it yet. But are you optimistic? What do you want to say?
But North Carolina, I understand he has won North Carolina. So I personally believe.
That's what I said. And that's what I said. If she can't win these states, the path for her has shrunk, not for him. For her.
Right. So if Trump wins two more states, one is Pennsylvania and Michigan, then it's a clear path. But I little bit differ with Yashwant when he says that abortion was one of the main issues. If you see, only 14% women, he said that women voted for Kamala Harris because of the abortion issue. But it's only 14%. If you see the percentage of voters voting on the issue of abortion is only 14%. So it's not one of the major issues in front of the voters at this time, as it was expected that it will become a major issue. But I do agree with Seema when she says that Kamala Harris could not define herself. I personally believe if Biden had not dropped himself from the race, it would have been much tougher contest between Biden and Trump as compared to Kamala Harris and Trump, because by and large, especially I'm talking of independent voters, they know about Biden, they know about his policy, and we have to take into consideration in the Democratic primaries, Biden was the front runner. So one bad debate, presidential debate, was not going to have that kind of adverse effect. In fact, Trump, when he had a debate with Kamala Harris, he could not do well also in that debate. So
right. Yes. I don't know. We can have a separate debate on abortion. I think what Yashwant was trying to say was that if Kamala Harris is able to make it, then it would be because of the female voter. Meanwhile, I was trying to say that her path to victory, as I understand US politics, I'm no expert, but Pennsylvania, look at the Pennsylvania numbers. Trump is ahead with 51.3% of the votes compared to Kamala Harris at 47.8%. Pennsylvania was key to Kamala Harris's hopes. So this is important. It is 19 votes in the Electoral College. North Carolina has been called for Donald Trump. Trump is ahead in Wisconsin. Trump is ahead in Michigan. I don't think it's looking very good for the Kamala Harris camp at this point? Yashwant, you understand numbers more than I do. If you just want to briefly come in, then Ornab and Jamie has the closing
Just
word.
quickly, that Pennsylvania still will go down the wire, because in the
Yes.
Philadelphia area, the
Correct.
volume of voters, this is only 50% counting done. So
Yeah.
that will still go down the wire. But yes, North Carolina was very impressive, I would say. If Georgia goes Trump way, North Carolina goes Trump's way, I mean, then you see a kind of a much larger uniform swing of sort, in the among the swing states, which among the demographics, which would call this election in a much uniform way.
Absolutely. But Ornab, again, we're not calling this yet. In
Yes.
fact, Associated Press is projecting that
No.
Kamala Harris has crossed 200 seats to 200, 205 to Trump, 230 for Trump. So God knows. But last thoughts?
Sure. So the last thing that I went in, regardless of who wins and who loses, the problem, and this is perhaps germane to Indian viewers of this show. So what happens is that in a country, when you have the identity politics usually starts with minorities, and I'm not even referring to the country here. It starts with targeting certain minorities, and anybody who protests against that is considered or is made to feel bad. It's not a question of difference of opinion. You're a Nazi. So if you're an American and if you oppose illegal immigration, the lines between illegal and legal immigration are blurred, and you said that you are basically opposing legal immigration, you're a white supremacist. When this keeps on happening, and this is not just one person on social media, when somebody like Stephen Colbert is saying this day in and day out on television, people who are otherwise in the center kind of like say, you know what, screw it, I'm going to vote for Trump. This is how you drive moderate people to the extreme. This has happened in India. This has happened in the US. And I didn't think it would happen in the US, but it has happened. That's the point that I initially made.
Okay, Jamie, I have a feeling Jamie might agree that we're ending on this point of America may be divided, but this panel seems to be in some kind of broad consensus. Jamie Metzel, I'm going to give you the closing
No,
word.
I agree. I think that the toxicity of identity politics has just spread. And so it started out, as was just said, with minority groups saying, we've gotten screwed over by the system. And then they woke up the dragon of these white men. I was actually having dinner at the home of my friends in the suburbs outside of New York the other day, and their 14-year-old boy who's like raging with hormones, and he's just discovering girls. His parents are left-wing Democrats, and he was for Trump. And it was clear there was one reason why he was for Trump, because all these people in his school were saying that you need to be woke and progressive, and all of your friends are the whatever transsexuals. And you had Donald Trump who's saying, you're a man, be a man, grab women by the genitals, you can do it. And Donald Trump has inspired America to be our absolute worst. We'll see what happens. I still have hope for that Kamala Harris could pull this off, and I'm certainly rooting for it, and I'm going to stay up as late as it takes to see what happens. But Donald Trump is a vile and despicable human being. He's a convicted felon. He has assaulted so many different women. He has cheated and lied. He's attacked journalists in our country. He has made America worse. But if he's elected tomorrow, as terrible as it is, he is also the president of our country. And as I said earlier, we are all in this same boat. So if he should win, while we as Democrats must do absolute soul searching, we also we can't. I don't want to have another civil war. We have to figure out the best way forward.
I was just going to say before we close that Trump may be whatever you feel he is to you, but you can't judge those who vote for him. They are your fellow citizens. And I think the big mistake, I'm just going to let you respond, the big mistake that has been made, Hillary Clinton calling voters a basket of deplorables, Biden calling them garbage or trash right now, albeit triggered by a joke at a horrible joke at a Trump rally. I think the challenge for Democrats and even for liberals everywhere else is you can oppose politics, but you can't dismiss the voter, because then how do you believe in democracy? Jamie, can we unmute Jamie, please? Can we unmute Jamie? Jamie's on mute. Can we unmute Jamie?
There
Yes,
you go.
Jay.
Thank you. Yeah, that is also my view. I didn't say anything about Trump voters. I have actual friends who are Trump voters. I do podcast interviews with people who are supporting Trump. And as a matter of fact, I understand the anger that some people feel. What I was saying about Trump himself, because politics is a choice. Sir, it's not just a pure reflection of the electorate, although that is certainly the case here, and the role of social media and all of these other factors. But politicians, I think, are very important actors, and we've had great presidents in the United States. People like Franklin Roosevelt, who really inspired us to be our best. None of these people were perfect, and that's, I think, the role of great politicians. And it's unfortunate that we have had a race to the bottom when we could have a race to the top. We also had a civil war here in the United States, and we got over it. And so it's not over. Our country isn't over, but we're going to need to work really hard to rebuild our political parties and strengthen and reinvigorate our democracy.
I know Indians watching this in particular, there's so many parallels to our politics. And I think once the American election is actually called, we can have that debate in more detail. I'm going to let all of you get back to tracking the numbers, and I'll do the same, and hope to talk to all of you again. Thank you to Anandji, to Yashwant Deshmukh, to Orna Prain, to Jamie Metzel, and to all our panelists before, and to our audience. See you soon with our next edition of our special broadcast on the US presidential elections. Thanks for watching. Take care. It's great to see you here. Thank you for watching our work. If you haven't subscribed yet, don't forget to click the bell icon and subscribe to Mojo Story and support independent, robust journalism.